Imagine you're walking home. You've been tracking a herd since sunrise. You know this route, every dune, every dry riverbed, every landmark that tells you how much farther there is to go. You've walked it in your father's footsteps, and he walked it in his. Your family is 2 hours behind you, following the same path, trusting you to lead them to water before dark. The desert this time of year is unforgiving but familiar. You know its moods, the way the light changes at noon, the way the ground hardens overnight and softens by midday. You think you know what it's capable of. You don't, not yet. Then the wind changes. Not stronger, different. It shifts direction, and the air starts tasting like metal. You look up. The horizon isn't blue anymore. It's brown, a wall of it, taller than any mountain you've ever seen, rolling towards you without slowing down. You have maybe 6 minutes. 6 minutes isn't long enough to reach shelter. It isn't long enough to reach your family. It isn't even long enough to be properly afraid. You start running toward the sound of their voices, and that's when you realize something worse. You can't hear them anymore. The wind has started roaring, a sound like a waterfall, except you're standing in the driest place on earth. The sky disappears first, then the ground. Sand gets into your eyes, even squeezed shut, into your nose, down the back of your throat with every breath you take. Within a minute, you can't see your own hand held out in front of your face. You can't call out. Opening your mouth means swallowing grit. You can't run. Every direction looks exactly like every other direction. You're not lost. You're erased. There was one skill that mattered more than speed, more than strength, more than knowing the route better than anyone else in your family. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a tool. It was knowing exactly what to do in the first 10 seconds, before panic made the decision for you. You drop immediately. You pull your knees up, curl into the smallest shape your body can make, and press your forearm across your face. This instinct wasn't invented by one clever person and passed down as a story. It was learned the same way most desert survival knowledge was learned, by watching animals do it first. Herders who spent their whole lives beside camels noticed that the animals often kneel low and turn their backs to the wind before a storm fully arrives, sheltering their faces against their own bodies. Whether the animals sense the storm coming through changes in pressure or smell or something no one has ever fully measured, generations of herders trusted the pattern enough to stop waiting to feel the wind themselves. They watched the animals instead and passed that habit down as instinct, not theory. You curl down exactly the way you were taught, by someone who was taught the exact same thing by someone before them. Nobody wrote this down in a manual and handed it out. It moved the way most survival knowledge moves in places without libraries or schools, through repetition, through fear, through a parent grabbing a child's shoulder mid-storm and physically pushing them into the right position until the body remembers it on its own. By the time you're old enough to understand why you're doing it, you've already done it 100 times without thinking. But curling up doesn't solve the real problem. You still have to breathe. And breathing wrong, in a storm like this, can kill you just as fast as the wind itself. This is why desert travelers, for as long as anyone has kept a record of it, never moved through open country without cloth wrapped loosely around the lower half of the face. Not decoration, equipment. The specific style changes from region to region and era to era. The loosely wound cloth of the Sahara looks nothing like the wrapped headscarves used along old Silk Road caravan routes. But the underlying idea repeats itself everywhere sand and wind meet skin. Cover the mouth, cover the nose, breathe through fabric, not air. Wrapped correctly, that cloth filters out enough sand to keep a person breathing for the 10, 20, sometimes 40 minutes a bad storm can last. Without it, prolonged exposure can genuinely suffocate a person, the air itself turning into something closer to dust than oxygen. People have died standing upright, in the open, simply from breathing the wrong air for too long. You press the cloth tighter against your face and breathe in short, careful pulls, through your teeth, the way you were shown before you were even old enough to understand why. But your family is still out there. Somewhere behind you, inside this same wall of brown, are the people you were supposed to be leading home. You can't see them. You can't call out to them. All you can do is stay low, keep breathing, and hope the last thing you ever taught them was exactly what you're doing right now, at this exact moment, without them. This part stops being about survival technique. This is about whether the people you love learned fast enough, whether all those years of watching you, copying you, being pulled into the sand by your hand actually stuck when it mattered. Minutes pass like this, curled, blind, breathing through cloth, counting nothing, waiting for a sound that never seems to come. Then, slowly, the wind starts to thin before the sound does. Visibility returns in stages, first shapes, then colors, then detail, the way a photograph slowly develops in a darkroom. You wipe the sand from your eyes. Then you notice something strange. There are no footprints anywhere, not yours, not your family's, not the herd's. The ground has been completely rewritten, scoured clean and reshaped, every trace that you were ever here erased in a single afternoon. You were standing in this exact spot 2 hours ago, and the desert has no memory of it. So how do you find your way home through a landscape that no longer remembers you? You stand there for a moment, turning slowly, looking for anything the storm didn't have the power to take. Ahead of you, half buried, a shape starts to resolve out of the settling dust. A pile of stones, stacked taller than a person, placed there generations ago by someone who understood this exact problem. A cairn. You walk toward it, and only once you're close enough to touch it do you let yourself look past it, scanning the horizon for what should come next. There, further out, barely visible through the haze still hanging in the air, a second shape, another cairn. You almost missed it. If the dust had settled 30 seconds later, you might have. For a moment, you just stand between the two of them, catching your breath, letting your eyes adjust to a world that has color again. The stones don't look impressive up close. Weathered, uneven, stacked by hands that have been gone for longer than anyone can say. But right now, they're the only thing on this entire horizon that hasn't moved. These weren't decorations either. They were a route, marked in stone, specifically because stone survives what everything else does not. Variations of this same idea appear independently along old Silk Road trade corridors, across the open Sahara, and through the deserts of the Arabian Peninsula. Entirely different cultures, thousands of kilometers apart, arriving at the identical solution to the identical problem. When the ground itself can no longer be trusted, you build something the wind can't erase. You move from the first cairn toward the second, the way you were taught to, one stone marker at a time, and somewhere near the third pile of stones, you finally hear it. Voices. Your family, curled low exactly the way you taught them, cloth still wrapped tight over their faces. Nobody says anything for a moment. There's nothing that needs saying. You just sit down together in the settling dust and breathe. Properly, for the first time in an hour. You will tell this story for the rest of your life, and every time, the 6 minutes will feel shorter in the telling than they felt standing in the sand. Not everyone finds their way back. Somewhere in deserts like this one, entire groups of people have vanished without ever being found again, swallowed so completely that no bones, no belongings, no trace was ever recovered. There's an old story about exactly that. A story large enough that historians still argue over it today. An entire army, 50,000 men, marching across open desert. And then, nothing. That's the story the ancient Greek historian Herodotus recorded in the 5th century BCE. According to his account, a Persian army under King Cambyses II was crossing the Egyptian desert when a sandstorm rose while the soldiers were eating their midday meal. The wind didn't stop. When it finally cleared, there was no army left to find. No bodies, no weapons, no trace at all. Modern archaeologists have spent over a century searching for physical evidence of that army, and nothing conclusive has ever turned up. Many historians today believe the number was exaggerated, or that the story was invented later entirely, a legend built to explain something that felt too enormous to have an ordinary explanation. No mass grave has ever been confirmed, no weapons cache, no army-sized trail of anything. For over 100 years, expeditions have gone looking specifically for this army, drawn by the sheer scale of the claim, and each one has come back with nothing conclusive enough to settle the question either way. But whether that specific army existed exactly as described or not, the fear behind the story was completely real. People who lived beside this desert believed, without question, that it was capable of erasing 50,000 men in an afternoon. And after what you've just survived with a group of a handful of people, you understand exactly why they believed it. True story or not, it describes something the desert is genuinely capable of. Here's the part almost nobody expects. The same wind capable of erasing an army is also capable of protecting one, perfectly, for thousands of years. In Egypt's Valley of the Kings, drifting sand buried tomb entrances so completely that several, including the tomb of Tutankhamun, remained hidden from looters for more than 3,000 years, undiscovered simply because the doorway itself had disappeared beneath the surface. Farther east, in China's Taklamakan Desert, that same bone-dry, oxygen-starved sand did something even stranger. It preserved entire human bodies without anyone intending it to happen. The Tarim mummies, some nearly 4,000 years old, were found with skin, hair, and woven wool clothing still intact. Not because anyone tried to embalm them, but because the sand sealed them away from air and moisture the moment it closed over them. The same storm that could kill you in 6 minutes might keep your face recognizable for 4,000 years. And the desert holds one more secret, buried the same way. Deep in the central Sahara, at a site called Tassili Na'ajer, rock paintings dated to roughly 6,000 years before the present show something that seems almost impossible standing here, in this heat, surrounded by nothing but stone and sand. Swimmers, cattle herds, rivers, wide-open grassland, painted by people who lived in a Sahara that was green. It's worth being honest about what these paintings can and can't tell us. They don't prove anything about how ancient people survived sandstorms specifically. No inscription explains technique. No image shows someone curling into the sand. What they prove is something quieter and, in its own way, just as powerful. That the ground beneath your feet right now was once unrecognizable. Grassland, water, a different world entirely, buried under the same sand that just tried to bury you. The desert you're standing in wasn't always a desert. It changed, slowly, over thousands of years, and the wind that reshaped it also buried the paintings that prove the older world ever existed at all, sealing the evidence away until someone patient enough finally dug it back out. And that same wind is still moving, right now, carrying more than just sand. It starts somewhere you'd never expect to matter, a single dried lakebed in Chad called the Baudelaire Depression. Fine mineral dust lifts off its surface and rises high enough to cross the entire Atlantic Ocean, carried on air currents that never stop moving, day or night, season after season. Follow that same dust far enough, and thousands of kilometers later, it settles over the Amazon rainforest, a jungle that sits on some of the poorest soil on Earth, stripped of nutrients by constant, relentless rain. That dust from Chad carries phosphorus, a nutrient the Amazon's own soil can't hold on to for long. Scientists studying satellite data have tracked this exact journey, desert to ocean to rainforest, and found that this dust delivery isn't a rare event. It happens continuously, an invisible supply line running between two of the most different landscapes on the planet. Two landscapes that could not look more different, one buried in sand, the other drowning in green, connected by a single current of air neither of them controls. The same wind that just tried to erase you and your family is, at this exact moment, feeding a jungle on the other side of the world. A sandstorm doesn't ask who deserves to survive it. It doesn't care how far you've walked, how well you know the route, or how much your family is counting on you to get them home. It simply moves everything sitting on the surface to somewhere else and buries the rest, without explanation and without apology. Ancient people couldn't stop it, they couldn't outrun it, and they couldn't outthink it. All they could do was learn, failure after failure, generation after generation, exactly what to do in the first 10 seconds, and then make absolutely certain that knowledge reached the people walking behind them before the next storm arrived. You don't beat a sandstorm. You just make sure someone after you knows what you knew. Years from now, it will be someone else curled low in the sand, cloth pressed to their face, waiting for a wind they didn't choose to arrive. Maybe it will be someone from your own family. Maybe it will be someone who never met you at all, only inherited the habit the same way you did, without ever being told exactly where it came from. That's the part the desert can't erase, no matter how completely it rewrites everything else. Not the footprints, not the map, not even the stones, eventually. What survives is smaller than all of that and harder to bury, a person who knew what to do, teaching someone else before the wind ever gave them a reason to ask.